Well, thanks for joining us. We're here with our third series and our third Pleasanton teacher to just kind of talk about a wrap up to the end of the year and how things have gone. So I'd like to introduce not only Biomed CTE All-Star from Foothill High School, but also Pleasanton's Teacher of the Year this year, Mr. Josh Hill. Josh, thanks for joining us today and just sharing about a little bit about your experiences these last few months of school. But before
Sure.
we dive into that, do you want to just give us a little Josh Hill Pleasanton history? Where did you start? How long have you been teaching here? And what do you do?
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. So, this is my 12th year at Foothill, 17th year teaching overall. Um, I'm a Bay Area person, so I've always grew up being around here and always knew the Pleasanton schools were great. And so when I moved back to this area is when I started teaching there. It's been awesome. I started off teaching just regular biology there. Also have a PE credential, so taught that a little bit. But then when we started this biomed program 7, 8 years ago, I jumped into that, and we started that, and that started from one class with a few sections, and now we're at 3 levels and 11 sections, and that's what I've been focusing on. That put me into moved me from the science department over into CTE. Although technically these biomed classes are a lab science class on students' transcripts are in CTE. So that's my time in Pleasanton here.
Well, thanks so much for telling us a little bit about yourself, Josh. I've had the privilege of being able to kind of work with you these past couple of years. We've been involved in a telepresence grant, and who would have known? Here we are rolling into year 3, and we're all teaching via telepresence now, right? The
For sure.
happened
Did not see that coming.
no, but over the years, I've gotten to see your class, and you do so many amazing things. But CTE programs in particular are so hands-on. How is this emergency shift into remote teaching impacted your kind of daily instruction?
So it's been tough. I feel as if when I've modified my assignments, like I've said to you before, that I felt good at the end. Like, all right, kids, you're going to do this virtual lab, and then you're going to here's a video of previous students doing the lab, and then here's some results pictures that I have saved, and then they're trying to diagnose the patient or figure out what happened. But at the end, I'm like, that is not the same. It is not what we're really trying to do in our CT classes, which is have them do it and them figure it out with their hands and all that. And so obviously students can research from home and all that stuff, but all that hands-on stuff has been lacking. And oftentimes in all content areas, you're building all year to these big level projects at the end. And that's the same with us, where they really would have done, we would have been growing bacteria. We would have been working with live cancer cells. We would have been working with real DNA. All these skills we've been building towards, and then all of a sudden we go home and we're doing it virtually, and that's not the same. So that's been a bummer. But trying to just walk kids through it has been fine, and the feedback from them, they're like, okay, we get it, but that's because we've established those relationships and those expectations, and thinking about trying to do this from the day one next year or something, that's going to be tough to try and really set the stage with nothing but a computer screen in front of them. So, but that's how it's gone these last couple of months here.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about it, you had such an advantage in that you had this community that you've already established in person, and they set these expectations. And I hear what you're saying. There's no way when you're holding that heart and you're actually dissecting it and feeling the scalpel like cut into the tissue, it's just different than when you watch it. I feel like,
of course,
the smell, just your senses, the way that you interact, and it's got to be really, really tough. But with some of what you're saying, how have your students handled it? I mean, how have they been responding to trying to tackle some of the virtual instruction versus what they're used to?
Well, I just had, kind of my goodbye calls with my morning classes the last couple of days. And, they always have good things to say. I have such good students. And of course, they're cranking out the work and they're doing what I asked. But And then I get on these little side chats or on the comments on these assignments, and they're, of course, like, oh man, that would have been cool to do in person and all that stuff. And, and it would have been cool to do that. And
you
so,
teach multi-level courses, right?
yeah. So with our overarching biomed program throughout the whole region, we have 9 courses. I teach the first and the third level course, which is one of our intro course and then our capstone course. So we do some really cool stuff at every level. That third level course, it's all really both courses, they're all hands-on. But by the time students get to that third level course, it's labs all the time. And in that class, we were doing some pretty high tech. We would have been doing some pretty hardcore high tech stuff. We would have been taking a gene out of a jellyfish, putting it into bacteria, and then that bacteria would have glowed because jellyfish have that bioluminescence gene. And we put it in bacteria, and then it would have glowed, and it's amazing, for these kids to be like, what? They grow this, we isolate it, and then all of a sudden, we take it a step further, and we start to purify that protein, which means we get rid of everything else and just have that glowing protein. And we then compare it to like, this is how you mass produce stuff for medications and stuff. When we hear about, these plants in the rainforest that actually grow antibiotics, like you can't just hand that person who's sick the plant. You got to purify it and get everything out. And we would have been doing all that. And so did we try to walk through it on paper or through a screen? Yes. But like I was saying, it's not the same. It's not the same for them to just see a picture at the end. Oh, cool. That's a glowing test tube. Real cool, Mr. Hill. But, in person, that would have been awesome.
I appreciate you describing kind of the detail of some of these projects, because I don't know if a lot of people really truly understand some of the technical components to specifically our higher level CTE programs with the engineering courses and, your biomed classes. It's not just something where, okay, we can get a device for everybody and you can have that same experience, or it's not like there's just a small, a package of materials that you need.
Right.
You're talking about like, what you're talking about, growing bioluminescent jellyfish protein. I mean, it's really, really high level and professional work. I mean, so we have so many different challenges. But with that, let me ask you a different question, kind of along the same lines. And I don't know, I think one of the opportunities that we have during this is it's a time to shift some of our thinking in what our more traditional instruction has been like. And, in CTE, you guys are very hands-on already. You do think very much along the lines of, project-based assignments and kind of very, very deep assessments. But how, or do you think there's an avenue or have you had an opportunity to, especially with your course Biomed, start talking about just what you were saying with the process of vaccines and diseases and, the spread of what we're living currently, and is the source of all this? Has that kind of rolled into your course as at all?
For sure. We especially in the first level course, we actually were just by virtue of our regular schedule, we were going to get into infectious disease. And so if we were in class, it would have been, another fake patient, and we would have, done some activities. And we do one where we swap bodily fluid, which is really just a couple chemical indicators, and then we add some things and we see who got the disease from mixing with their classmates and all that. And so we took that, and we weren't able to do that hands-on part, but we were, there's so much information about how disease spread and how our body fights it right now in the news, as it should be. And so we tried to take that and tweak that, and we came up with some activities where we had students diagram like, okay, here's how the infection would spread if we don't do anything. No social distancing, no nothing. Here's how it would spread if we partially socially distance, or here's how it spread if we fully quarantined, like all these different kind of scenarios. And they can kind of model how we flatten the curve, right? That's that term that we all know now, flattening the curve. And so they had to kind of work through that stuff and figure out which ways were actually best. And so it's been awesome to learn that stuff. And then obviously on top of that, teaching students how our immune system works. And because what's all these questions in the news right now? Why is this so deadly for some people and then other people are asymptomatic? And what does that even mean? And how can you still pass on something when you don't feel it? and all that. So yeah, that's been very apropos and it's been awesome. But again, it doing it through a screen is just different. It would have been nice to be in the classroom, and because actually going back to what you're saying before about how as students change, like missing all these little connections and conversations to this stuff. It's one thing for me to throw up all the instructions, but when we're in the class, we can, go off topic a little bit, and get into what they're genuinely scared about, what they genuinely want to know about, what they feel good about, what they are flippant about, are they like, oh, come on, this, we don't need to do that. We don't need a mask, right? Or whatever. And whereas you don't get to have that remotely. I mean, sure, we can have some live classes and stuff like that, but we all are, dealing with Zoom fatigue and all that. And so it's lost a little bit of luster there. But yeah, we've definitely tried to incorporate all this stuff as we should, and we've been able to.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because it really is. I mean, even the little, I find myself in Zoom meetings or Zoom classes or whatever it is, and I'm so used to the little comment, I just kind of whisper over to the person next to me, and either, it's a way for me to help process my thinking in what we're engaging in. And I know, to some extent it's a little bit disruptive, but in a way, you can't do it anymore. Like, you just kind of lost that ability. And for people who process like that, who need to think about it and, maybe what it translates to, or in real time share their ideas with, whoever, like, you don't have that. And you as the teacher, when you see those kind of disruptions, and, you realize that you just made a comment about how everyone really needs to wear their masks, and like everyone's all kind of giggling about it. Well, let's talk about that, and let's kind of unpack that and really understand why, right, we have these guidelines out there, and see what's on kids' minds. Because if you don't get through that, that effective filter goes up, and you just like, it doesn't matter what else is happening.
Yeah.
You're focused on one thing, and until that is addressed, like, it just creates these roadblocks as you start moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And those side conversations and stuff, like, we've been, taught a little bit about how if a student posts work, you can have your other students have to comment on that work to try and recreate those conversations. It is nowhere near the same, because now students just see that as another little assignment. It's not genuine. It's not authentic. Where when they, in the school setting or on a lab table setting, they genuinely would be asking each other questions or sharing, oh, that was cool, or that was not, or whatever. And you miss that. Or that interaction with me. For me, I'm always trying to tell stories and have some real life connections, and that is always lost through this mode of it, whereas in person we can stop and talk and share, and all of a sudden another student's like, oh yeah, my grandma is sick right now, and all that, and like, oh yeah, we're worried about, passing it to my dad who's got a compromised immune system, or whatever, and like all of a sudden you're really into it. And right now we're just getting through assignments.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the dangers now, is it's so easy to just kind of like, well, here's what's going to be next in the book, and we're going to go to that, and here's the next assignment, and here's the next thing, and kind of progress through our courses, and really miss some of that teaching. I mean, the amount of time that we have with kids is diminished drastically, because you lose all of the time in between classes. You lose the kids who are staying after, and the kids who are hunting you down at lunchtime or whatever it is to ask you their questions and have those conversations. Right? Whether they're about biomed or they're just about life. And you kind of said something else too that I've really been wondering about. And we've had a lot of focus on social emotional learning over the past few years. But as we're dealing in this pandemic, for a lot of people, I mean, I don't know if we just hit 100,000 deaths in the United States.
Yeah,
like,
we did.
It's really, it's a source of trauma for some kids. And I'm wondering if you've done anything or looked at, with addressing some of the social emotional well-being with your students, or is there an avenue maybe in kind of iterating some of your course into, let's start talking about mental health a little bit and what's happening, to people. I mean, yeah.
My, Scott, I'm not sure if you were in my classroom any of these days, but just this past year, these last few years, I've been working on trying to incorporate some mental health patients into my class, right? Because I just make up these patients and we diagnose them, but it's a physical ailment. And not that mental health is not, there's not a physical component to it, but it's just different. And so finally, these last couple of years, we've dove into that. You know, we've had a patient that was dealing with physical ailment, but it was causing serious depression and suicidal thoughts. And so we were able to, you know, students were sharing what stresses them out and how do they cope with that, both in healthy ways and unhealthy ways. And then we came up with, what behavior should they be looking for and all that stuff. And that fosters this environment where I have students more often than I'd wish to admit come to me about, hey, I'm worried about my friend, or I'm having struggle myself. And so that's always been very personal to me. Someone that's dealt with far too much suicide in their life. And so this way, though, digitally, like the best I've been able to do is send private comments, to kids and emails. And I've given them some avenues of like, here, dump some thoughts here if you're struggling right now. They all know. And again, this comes from all year building a relationship. They all know if they need more time, they don't even have to ask. It's fine. It's fine, and all that. But again, that's not the same. That's not the same as being able to feel that kid as they walk through the door and their head's kind of down or whatever sign they have, and to go walk by them, you put your hand on their shoulder and be like, you okay today? What's going on today? And I've had students share during this, remote learning time, some stuff, but it's also like, well, I don't know what else I can do right now besides lessen the workload. I can't walk you over to the counselor right now. I can give you their email. It's just not the same. And it's so important right now. I think all of us, adults too, are dealing with, I don't want to call it a new set of emotions, but a new set of something. This situation is all brand new to everybody. Yeah. And we don't know how to process all this. And so I, for one, as I, crank out all these assignments, every time it starts off with, look, if you're not healthy, and your family's not healthy right now and good, this doesn't matter. That's the case if we're in the classroom or not. But right now, especially as we don't even know how to process, my kids are little and they're feeling different and they don't know how to express that. And that doesn't even mean, adults know how to express those feelings, or teenagers. And so we're trying, I'm definitely trying to make those connections about mental health and all that, but that's been a struggle too, just for me personally, managing my own, let alone reaching out to the kids.
Yeah, and you mentioned Zoom fatigue, and there's just so many differences to the way that we have to interact, and it's just different than being in person. It's more tiring, it's more stressful. It's, we talk about screen time, and that's all we do. I have a little infant too, and we don't watch a lot of TV in our house, and we didn't want him watching TV. And so we don't have that on, but his whole world now is connected through Zoom, like all on screens. He has to, otherwise he doesn't see his, it's so strange. And you're right. We're all dealing with so many interesting things. And I just, I appreciate the connections that you've built, that you have students that are still feeling comfortable to talk to you about some of those things. What I really am concerned about is as we move forward next year and you have a new group of students who haven't built that with you. And if we start off remotely or in some hybrid world, how that interacts, because the kids who are really having problems, it's not even, you can't feel them, you can't see them, right? Like if they did your Zoom, it's just their icon.
Right.
It's not a face. There's not. And so even if they're there and present, they could even put something in the chat and you would still have no real connection with, who's behind that and where they are. And I think it's just something that we're all going to have to deal with. And, we're doing the best we can. We've had a very interesting past few months. I like to say that it's kind of been this interesting grace period and this transition into distance learning. And we're very fortunate. We had devices out, we've had the infrastructure in place. We had a lot of components to really be ready to meet this challenge.
Sure.
But there's no one who would say that this is the ideal model, right? 100% distance learning. There may be some great benefits and some little pieces that we can pull and maybe leverage moving forward. But in a perfect world, and one of the reasons why I'm excited to ask you this next question is because, especially in CTE, you often, with the engineering classes and the problem solving and the thinking, like you've actually designed buildings that you're going to have built at Foothill.
Mhm.
So if we were going to redesign what school looked like, I'm just kind of curious what, in a perfect world for you next year. I mean, if we can't all be back, I don't know, what are some of the really important things that you think need to be considered? And do you have any suggestions or ideas?
You know, our engineering classes actually, some of their assignments they've been modifying is social distancing devices, just for the community at large. And then it was, and how can we do this at school? What can we modify and change at school? And, you know, as far as what you said before about what can we take from this that's been good, if we have to reduce, the contact amongst people and all that stuff, if that translates into reducing classroom sizes to get that, which is what we've been working on for decades in education, right? To get these smaller groups, if we can use this as a way to step in that direction, and I'm sure it'll be wonky and not smooth, but just trying to, you think of a lab table in my class or in the engineering, you've been down in the engineering room, like there's just stuff everywhere. It's impossible to distance yourself. So if we can, create better workspaces that are can spread out some of the stuff, which can allow for some bigger projects and things, especially in engineering, which has been the goal of that designing that building. But at the same time, going back to before, but we also still want to be together and have these connections and stuff. So as far as trying to come up with the ideal, setting for this, I don't know. To be honest, I go back and forth all the time on, oh yeah, we got to be able to get back in the classroom, at least for this little bit, this kind of hybrid model and all that. But that's a want. That's not going to trump the global health, of everything and all that. And so it's been difficult as I look at all these, read all these articles and take all these surveys and all that stuff. And I feel like I'm on all ends of the spectrum all the time with where I want to be and how will it be safe. You see these pictures of students in other countries that are already back, in school, and what does that look like? And, yeah, I think we can use it as some learning things. As like I said, especially as engineering students have taken that and run with that with different ideas. They've, shared one with me about, grocery store shopping, like being more distance there and having devices that would go get the groceries for us. And they were working on that, but the school's going to be tough. The school by design is to bring people together, and here we are trying to spread people out.
I know
And that's tough.
it's one of the, I mean, I think it's probably one of the hardest places to social distance from, right? It just, I don't think it's better. It's a place that we try and bring people together. And, it's unfortunate because with the social distancing and just the changes from like going to the store that I've seen, right? And like the businesses that are trying to operate and their capacity, it's kind of really become so impersonal. It's become this kind of like everybody is, it's just the way that we're approaching people, and this idea that, well, you could be the spreader. I don't want to get sick from you. And we lose so much of what we really cherish about the opportunities of getting together, that it just, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe there's a, a 1 day a week lab component that everyone gets to come to in small groups and, use the equipment. And then you're doing all the planning and the prep work, kind of more independently at home. It's going to be really interesting to see how we move forward. Again, I'm very grateful and very fortunate that I think, we're well positioned as really anyone could be to thrive in this just unknown and strange environment.
Right. And I agree. And I think about how different it is at the different levels and different content areas. Again, like, could we spread out a history class that is learning about some, maybe not doing a hands-on project. Like, okay, I can envision that. But then, we don't do any labs where it's just one person in the stuff. Well, we try to sometimes, but it's always in a small group. And how do we do that? And then I think down to like elementary level, like how are we going to keep, kids away in some space? And then there's even a side of, should we be sharing some level of germs now and get this thing going in the population, which I'm not trying to say that's the right thing at all, but like, there's all these different thoughts and information about how we should move forward. And again, are we moving forward based on educational needs? Are we moving forward based on social emotional needs? Are we moving forward based on community obligations? Like, we need a place where kids can go so parents can work, and all of the above are important, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, it is. It's all of those kind of components working together and not one getting too far ahead of each other. And, the way that
Yeah,
everyone fits into this bigger economy that we all share, it's going to be quite the challenge.
it is.
It's been quite the wrap up, and I'm hopeful that at the end of next school year, I'll be able to play this back to you and be like, "Hey, listen to that
Yeah,
conversation that we had last year in the middle of this craziness." And who would have thought that this is where we are? But look, we're all on our feet, and that really is going to be my hope moving
right.
forward.
Of course.
Anything else that you want to share with us, or anything you're looking forward to as we unplug a little bit for the summer, hopefully, or as you just start thinking about what you might do to get started next year?
I do look forward to taking, the teaching and learning off my plate of my own and my daughter's for a little bit and just checking out, even though, our plans are shot, we're not going anywhere, but to have our bike ride go as long as we want rather than, well, we got to get back and you got to read that chapter and I got to grade those quizzes. And, removing that for a time is always awesome, and all of this stuff. I think it's always easier to look backwards and be like, well, now that we did that, we can change some things for the next time. But like, everything is still so changing and current that we don't even have that time to reflect and then make modifications. Where I hope we'll get that this summer. Whenever we decide to jump back into things, obviously we'll all be tied to, email a little bit, as we should, as we get information and try to plan for whatever the fall looks like. And there will be good things to take from this. It's just hard to uh, separate those from all the other things right now and all that. So, but of course, I always look forward to summer, man. It's always the best.
It is. What you said about just having the time to process and reflect. Like, we've just kind of been a flyby, and everything is, we're moving and really building the ship as we go. Right. I mean,
Totally.
we're taping stuff together and just trying to keep it in the air. And we've all been in the same location, like literally every time.
Right. We're not going anywhere.
I need to work on my background or something. And it'll be nice to step away. I mean, one of my concerns moving forward is the amount of screen time that we have. This new normal.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm just like, you was glued before, but now I'm glued to these devices, and I'm hoping that we'll have a new perspective, and once we get to step away for a week or two, and people will just kind of start naturally, because they're not going anywhere. They're all going to be sitting at home anyway, right? Like,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
and we're teachers, and that's just how it's going to be. We're going to continue thinking about what this means, but I'm looking forward to taking a deep breath for a little while.
For sure. We're hoping we're big campers, and we're hoping that campsites are open and, safely opened and spread apart and all that. But I'm hoping, because that, no screens are going to work out there. And that's why, part of why we try and go do that with our kids and all that. So.
Josh, well, I want to thank you very much for taking some time to chat with us, or with me today. And wish you the best, man.
I appreciate it, Scott. Always awesome to talk to you. I appreciate everything you do for me in my classroom and everyone in the district.
Right. Thank you so much. Have a great day. This was Josh Hill, Teacher of the Year at Foothill High School. I hope you have a good, relaxing summer, my friend.
All right, you too.